Head up to Washington, D.C., and joining us right now, Congressman Jodey Arrington. Congressman, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Chad. I'm doing great and continue to be the proudest man in Washington to represent West Texas. So it's wild and woolly up here, my friend.
That's one way to put it this week in Washington. Overall, okay, I just want to get your overall opinion on everything that has happened with the administration this week. There's a special counselor now that is going to be investigating whether or not, well, they can investigate anything they want, I guess, within the Trump administration. But do you think we're finally moving towards a resolution? Do you think this is a good thing or a bad thing to have a special counselor involved looking into the Trump administration?
Well, I think before we had the special counsel, we had 5 different entities conducting an independent investigation, intelligence committees, oversight committees, the Attorney General. So I don't know how many layers one has to put on something before somebody feels like we're going to get to the bottom of it. And all I want is for the facts to come out, and we should deal with the facts accordingly, but we don't need to prejudge this. There's no question in my mind where the media wants this to turn up. They're in a frenzy. They're frothing at the mouth to discredit this president. And listen, if the facts demonstrate that there are problems there and that there's behavior that is not appropriate or even illegal, I'll handle that in a way that's nonpartisan. I'm not going to be partisan about those kind of things. I'm an American first. But I got to tell you, there's little to zero objectivity in the mainstream media. So and I don't have a lot of hope, Chad, quite frankly, that a special prosecutor is going to dial them back. It's just going to feed into their narrative that our president is committing criminal acts and treason. And again, I want the process to play out. We've got enough eyeballs and independent investigations. We're going to get to the bottom of it, and then we need to move on and get this country back and drive on this agenda that we've got that, quite frankly, there's an epic clash ideologically on what we're trying to do to get this country back from the precipice of and the brink of becoming the liberal, progressive, secular European Union. And I'm telling you, it's an epic clash up here. And that's not to excuse any bad behavior, inappropriate behavior, or illegal behavior. I am nonpartisan on that. But let's be clear, all the rhetoric up till now, or most of it, let me just say a lot of the rhetoric has been partisan, bias, and it's frustrating.
What has, and we're going to get to some other stuff with you. We have you for the next 20 minutes here on the show, or a little bit over 20 minutes. So we are going to get into some actual legislation that is out there. But what is what is the mood within the Republican Party, within among your colleagues? What's the mood been like when, day after day this week, there's been a breaking news story when you had the Comey, the alleged Comey memo that dropped. It seems like a lot of Republicans went into a brief we don't want to talk to anybody mode, and then Republicans came out yesterday and started talking to folks. But what's the mood been like?
Oh, it's mixed, I think, Chad. It's frustrating because we have this amazing opportunity that you and your listeners are well aware of. And we've got a bold agenda, we got a bold president, and, the hopes for delivering on these things are high. They should be high. But you've got so many sideshows and distractions, and that's the reality. I'm not going to make it any less than what it is. it is a distraction to what we're trying to accomplish. But by the way, I'm not so sure that's not very intentional by those who don't want this agenda to go forward.
Right.
So, which is why, again, if you let the process play out, we'll get to the facts. But nobody's going to let that happen on the Democrat side, and nobody in the media is going to allow that to happen. So there's frustration about the distraction. I'll also, just to be fair, this president, his strength is his weakness. It's just like all of us. I mean, his strength is that he's an outsider, and he's shaking it up. And thank God he is. And as a guy who lived here and worked here with President Bush, I'm telling you, we needed a guy to shake things up. He doesn't play by the same rules. And he's not a respecter of people or parties. He certainly does not suffer fools or foolish media. And that's what I love about him. But at the same time, I think there's some needless activity that whether it's on social media with tweets or whatever, that I think is unproductive. And I think, just like me as a new member, he's got to strike a balance. He doesn't need to lose his personality. He doesn't need to lose his what got him here and what made him special. But you've got to have the humility and wisdom to say, you know what, let's make some adjustments for the sake of the cause that we're in, because the cause is righteous, and it's freedom, and it's a restoration of our country's greatness, and it's the constitutional republic and the future for our children, and all the things we talk about. So I'm trying to be objective and fair, but I would say that needs to happen too. But just like a lot of us, you got to take the upside with the downside. You can't have it all your way. And I'll take the upside with him every day over the downside. But he's got to learn and grow just like I do.
Congressman, we've got to take our first break. When we come back, we've got some legislation that you have introduced today that we will talk about, some breaking news there. And then we're going to get into some ag news as well with you when we come back. Sound good?
Sounds great.
All right.
Thank you, sir. All right, bye-bye.
We'll be right back with Congressman Jodey Arrington. Back on the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO. Joining me on the program right now, Congressman Jodey Arrington. And Congressman, thanks again for holding on during that break. You have some brand new legislation. It's bipartisan. It's not a word you read a lot these days. Bipartisan legislation that you have introduced today, correct?
That's correct, Chad. In fact, I just signed it while I was on break, and so we've officially a gentleman by the name of Ro Khanna from a liberal Democratic district in California, who, by the way, is a really good guy. And my wife has gotten to know his wife, and that's what West Texas is about. We're about relationships and where we can work together in a bipartisan way, we should. I think it's good for America. And in this case, it's term limits. He agrees with me, or we both agree, I should say, that if we're going to change the course of this country, we're going to have to change the culture of Washington. And one way to do that is to put limits on. I wish I could term limit the national media, but the next best thing is to limit politicians in their time here. I think that will change the dynamic in a positive way. It's not the panacea, but anyway, I think it's the right message from a guy that worked for President Obama from a liberal Democratic district in California, a guy that worked for George W. from a very conservative district in Texas. So if two guys like that can agree that we need to have people come up here, do their job, deliver on their promises, and then go home and live under the laws that they passed, like George Washington and our founding fathers intended for us to do, I think this country would take a big step in the right direction.
What does the legislation say? What do these term limits look like?
Well, we kept it very simple because I think if you make it too complicated, it hurts your chances of actually getting some momentum. And It's not like this hadn't been tried before, but I think maybe with the president like Donald Trump and with the sentiment, the public sentiment being what it is, I'm hoping we can get traction. But ours is real straightforward. 6 2-year terms in the House to correspond with 2 6-year terms in the Senate. So if you do, that's 12 and 12. If you go too short, you give too much power to staff and special interest, in my opinion. If you go too long, we have what we have. You have a career. So I think this is the right balance. And again, we keep it straightforward. And I think it's the only bipartisan term limit legislation. So I think this is a first, and I'm very proud.
How many other lawmakers in the House have you spoken about with this, and who all's on board and who's not on board right now, you think?
Well, I think we're going to get my freshman class is going to be very supportive. I'm hoping, Chad, here's kind of my strategy. If I can get my freshman class on the Republican side, I'll be whipping my guys, and Ro Khanna will be whipping the Democrats. If we can get our class, then I think we can challenge every other class to do the same. Maybe we can call it shaming the other classes to do the same. So that's kind of so I've talked to my class about it. The majority of them are on board. So we'll just kind of take that tack, and then we'll present it to the broader conference and see what we can get out of it. But I think it's the right thing to do. I know it's the right thing to do. I think it's the right balance in terms of the time that we give these guys to come up here and do their job.
We're visiting with Congressman Jodey Arrington. Congressman, I also know that you were able to meet with the new Ag Secretary this week, correct?
That's right. Sonny Perdue from a cotton state. Hope that is to our advantage. I talked to him on the phone, Chad. He's a really good guy. He's an ag background. I like having governors in these roles because you need a strong executive. He's got a reorganization. He's got a lot of big plans. But, I mean, I'm on message. We got to get cotton back in the Farm Bill. I pleaded my case publicly. I pleaded with him privately. And your listeners know how important that is to West Texas and how important it is to America. And that's what I tell them. Hey, your boss, our president, he's an American first guy. This is an example of putting America in the backseat or the trunk because of what the World Trade Organization, what they did, how they ruled, and now we got China walking all over us in this regard. However, because of our president, and I think I want to make note of this, we've got now, for the first time in 14 years, China opening up their markets to U.S. beef. That's huge for our ranchers. Largest market, 1.4 billion people, $2.5 billion in market value. So this guy's going to be a good secretary, and I know some of my colleagues from Georgia think highly of him. But I got one thing on my mind. That's getting cotton back in the Farm Bill.
Talk a little bit about the Vet Protection Act. I know that passed committee this week.
This is my first bill to mark up in committee. It passed. I wanted some bipartisan opportunity on veterans because I think you can do that. I will just tell you and your listeners, this was very partisan. But my commitment is to do the right thing. So if I can do the right thing and do it bipartisan, I'm going to do it. If I can't, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to push because it's the right thing. This limits people, union members, to that 25% of their time or less on union activity. A GAO report showed that hundreds were spending 100% of their time on union activity. I was outraged because of what we've seen with the VHA and the wait times and people dying waiting to get in to see a doctor and the backlog of disability claims, 5-year on average, 500,000 claims. This is absurd. This is big government bureaucracy at its worst, and I'm hell-bent, quite frankly, on breaking that culture up and giving the secretary the tools to do that and get it to work for the taxpayers and for the veterans. And we got it passed, and we're on our way to the House floor at some point. It's going to be hopefully in the near future.
How much support do you have on that, at least on the Republican side?
That's a great question. I will just, I'm always going to be candid with you guys. I thought I'd have tremendous support. I will tell you that there are some Republicans that I guess have union, interest in their district. I don't know. But by the way, I'm not litigating whether federal employees can unionize. I do have strong opinions about that. But I'm just saying you can't let the unions run away with these agencies. So I think I have to explain it to them. But I think the majority of Republicans support it. I just think I've got to do some spade work. But I believe we're going to get it. I think in the next few weeks you're going to see it move. They just need to know, because I actually made it more tougher. I had 50% threshold. I moved it to 25% for everybody. And if you make $100,000 or more, you don't get to participate in the union. So I made it tougher with my colleague Jim Banks from Indiana, and that got people to kind of say, hey, I need to be educated on this again, and that's appropriate.
All right, Congressman, appreciate your time today. And people want to hear more about the term limit bill. I know you and your team, you'll be doing a Facebook Live later on this afternoon, so folks can pay attention to your Facebook page and hear that later on. As always, appreciate your time.
Chad, great to be with you, and God bless.
All right, Congressman Jodey Arrington here on the Chad Hasty Show with breaking news on term limits.